4:52 in the morning, New Year's Day, 2023. The house is dark. The celebration is over, and a man in Cohasset, Massachusetts opens a laptop. 4:55 a.m. How long before a body starts to smell? 4:58 a.m. How to stop a body from decomposing. 5:47 a.m. 10 ways to dispose of a dead body if you really need to. These searches continued for days. By noon, he was at a hardware store. By the end of that week, he was driving to dumpsters across the region. His wife, Anna Walshe, 39 years old, mother of 3, had been dead for less than an hour when the first search was made. Her body has never been found. This is the story of Anna Walshe, and it is the story of the man she spent years believing she knew. Anna Lubicic was born in Belgrade, Serbia, in 1983. She grew up in a city with a complicated history, a place that had been through upheaval and reconstruction, and had come out the other side of all of it. And Anna appeared to carry something of that spirit with her. She was the kind of person who did not wait for circumstances to improve. She made decisions. She studied French language and literature at the University of Belgrade. And in 2005, she made the decision that would shape everything that followed. She emigrated to the United States. No network waiting for her, no guarantee of anything beyond her own capability. She found work in hospitality, in hotels, where talent surfaces fast if you have the intelligence and the interpersonal skill to earn trust quickly, and where both must be genuine because a room full of other people's expectations tests them every day. Anna had both. By the time she arrived at the Wheatley Hotel in Lenox, Massachusetts, a luxury property in the Berkshire Hills, she was in her mid-20s and had already built something real in a country that was not hers, in a second language. It was at the Wheatley that she met Brian Walshe. She later described it, in her own words, as love at first sight. By December 2015, she was Anna Walshe, married in Boston, with 3 sons following in quick succession. By January 2023, the oldest was 6. The youngest had just turned 2. From the outside, it was the life she had arrived in this country to build. She had constructed it entirely from effort, from nothing, in someone else's language. For a long time, she believed every part of it was real. What she did not know, what nobody around her had ever been told, was who she had actually married. Brian Walshe had a resume that looked impressive on paper. CFO titles, consulting roles, a LinkedIn profile listing positions at companies that, when journalists later searched for them, left almost no footprint. The kind of professional biography that describes status without producing evidence of it. He had attended Carnegie Mellon University, and there he built a friendship with a South Korean classmate whose family collected serious art, authentic works by major 20th century artists, Warhols, Herrings, the kind of collection that represents decades of careful acquisition and genuine expertise. The friend trusted Brian. In 2016, the friend asked Brian to help sell 2 pieces from the family's collection. 2 from Warhol's Shadows series, abstract canvases from 1978, fully authenticated, genuinely valuable. Brian listed them on eBay. He found a buyer, Ron Rivlin, the owner of the Revolver Warhol Gallery on Sunset Boulevard in West Hollywood, California. One of the country's foremost Warhol specialists. A man who had acquired more than 1,000 Warhol works over the course of his career, and who would later say he had never once been deceived until this transaction. On November 7th, 2016, Rivlin's assistant flew from Los Angeles to Boston. An $80,000 cashier's check was handed over. The assistant flew back to California with the paintings. When Rivlin removed the frames to inspect the canvases, something he had done hundreds of times, he noticed immediately. The canvases looked new. The staples were modern. There were no authentication stamps from the Warhol Foundation. The paintings Brian Walshe had sold for $80,000 were fakes. Rivlin tried to reach Brian Walshe immediately. Brian did not return his calls. Rivlin escalated through intermediaries, through legal pressure, eventually through the FBI. Brian continued not returning calls. When he could no longer avoid contact, he offered explanations, then delays, then further explanations. The process of extracting his guilty plea took the FBI, a federal prosecutor, and 3 years. When Rivlin was finally asked to describe the man who had defrauded him, he said this: "He knows how to play the legal system. He knows how to play everyone and everything. I've bought over 1,000 Warhols. This is the one and only acquisition that ever got past me. He was that good." The Korean friend never got his Warhols back. The art dealer lost $80,000 and 3 years of legal battles. And while all of this was unfolding, while the FBI was building a case, and federal hawker prosecutors were documenting what they called a pattern of lies, deceit, and fraud, Brian Walshe was living in Cohasset, Massachusetts, with a woman who believed she had married the love of her life. She wrote a letter to the federal judge in 2021 asking for leniency. She described Brian as a source of joy and comfort for their family. She said it was love at first sight, and that she felt the same way to that day. She did not know about the friend in South Korea. She did not know about Ron Rivlin. She did not yet understand that she was the third person in a sequence. On April 1st, 2021, Brian Walshe appeared in federal court and pleaded guilty. Wire fraud, interstate transportation for a scheme to defraud, unlawful monetary transaction. Court did not sentence him immediately. It demanded a full accounting of his finances, a process complicated by the fact that his wife's money had now become intertwined with the financial picture they were trying to assemble. Brian was placed on home confinement, house arrest, an ankle monitor, restricted to the family home in Cohasset, Massachusetts. Consider what home confinement means for a specific type of person. A man whose entire adult life had been built on movement, on presenting himself in different rooms to different people, managing the impression each of them held. Strip that mobility and what remains is whatever is actually there. What was actually there was a man owing the federal government $475,000 in restitution, waiting, static. In February 2022, Anna Walshe accepted a new position, regional general manager at Tishman Speyer, one of the largest and most consequential commercial real estate firms in the world. Brian himself, in a police interview months later while claiming to search for her, called it Anna's dream job. The role came with a significant salary increase and required her to work primarily from Washington, D.C. She began commuting. Cohasset to D.C., D.C., back to Cohasset. In March 2022, Anna sold the family's previous Cohasset property for $1.385 million, listed in her name alone. She purchased a townhouse in Washington, D.C., in the affluent neighborhood of Chevy Chase, also in her name alone. 2 properties, both transactions, both in Anna Walshe's name. While Anna was building something that was structurally, legally, entirely hers, Brian was in Cohasset, on a monitor, static, and something was shifting inside that house. Not loudly, not in any way that would show up in a police report or a court filing or a call to a neighbor. Quietly, the way pressure builds inside a sealed container, invisible from the outside. And then suddenly not. Brian Walshe could see exactly what was happening. He could see what it meant. And what the evidence would later establish is that by the end of 2022, he had already started doing something about it. There was one more piece of information Brian received in the autumn of 2022, something he found out about Anna that, when combined with everything else, appears to have moved him from calculation to action, something that made the timeline urgent. In 2022, as Anna established herself in Washington, she began a relationship. The man's name was William Fastow, a real estate professional in the DC area, separated from his own wife, who had helped her find housing when she first arrived for the Tish Man Spy-er role. They shared professional contexts, similar-aged children, common ground. Over time, the working relationship became something more. By autumn 2022, they were traveling together. A trip to Dublin, Ireland for Thanksgiving. After Dublin, Anna flew on to Belgrade to visit her mother in Serbia, still connected to where she had come from, still making that trip. At Christmas, she was with Fastow in Washington on Christmas Eve. Her flight back to Cohasset was delayed. According to trial testimony, that delay infuriated Brian. Fastow testified at trial about what Anna had told him concerning the children. She was, he said, extremely disappointed that she was not in a position to be the mother she believed her children deserved. She had set up rooms for them in her Washington townhouse, rooms specifically for her sons. A future being assembled, incrementally, in a house that was in her name, in a city where she was building a career that was entirely her own. She was planning to take her children with her. 5 days before she disappeared, Brian Walshe typed the following into a search engine. December 27th, 2022. What's the best state divorce for a man? Not whether to divorce. Which state had the best rules for him? Prosecutors later argued, and the jury ultimately accepted, that rather than pursuing the divorce he had already begun researching, Brian Walshe chose a different path entirely. New Year's Eve, December 31st, 2022. The Walshe family home in Cohasset, Massachusetts. A family friend, Jem Mutlu, was there for dinner. The evening was, by every account, completely normal. Mutlu told investigators he had seen no indication, not a word, not a look, not a single visible moment of tension of what was coming. After midnight, in the first hours of January 1st, 2023, Anna made a series of phone calls. She tried to reach her mother in Belgrade. She had called home regularly throughout the years, stayed connected to Serbia across the distance she had built her life beyond. That night, her mother missed the call. She tried her maid of honor, no answer. She tried her older sister, no answer. 3 calls. 3 people who mattered most to her, none of them answered. She was last seen alive at approximately 4 a.m. on January 1st, 2023. The following morning, Brian Walshe told investigators that Anna had left their home early for a work emergency, that she had taken a rideshare to Logan Airport and caught a flight to Washington, D.C. Investigators searched every record available to them. No rideshare booking, no flight manifest, no gate camera record, no departure log, no evidence that Anna Walshe had been anywhere near Logan Airport. She did not go to the airport. And by the time investigators understood that, Brian Walshe had been moving for 3 days. On January 4th, 2023, Tishman Speyer requested a welfare check at the Walshe family home after Anna had not reported to work and was not responding to contact. Brian filed a missing person report the same day, repeating the story about the early morning flight to Washington. When investigators searched the home on January 8th, they found what they needed in the basement: blood and a broken, damaged knife. Brian Walshe was arrested on January 8th, 2023, but the surveillance record had been building its own case since January 1st. In the days between Anna's disappearance and his arrest, Brian Walshe had been captured on camera at multiple retail locations. A Home Depot, where he bought mops, brushes, splash-resistant goggles, and a utility knife, a Lowe's and Home Goods on January 2nd, and again on January 4th, where he purchased rugs, towels, and candles. Replacement household goods bought across 4 consecutive days. His phone's location data placed him at a dumpster near his mother's apartment complex in Swampscott at 9:30 a.m. on January 5th, 4 days after Anna was last seen. What Brian does not appear to have fully calculated was that the digital record of those days was assembling a complete account around him. In real time, an account that would not require Anna's body to make its case. Because alongside the surveillance footage, the store receipts, investigators had found something else entirely. Something Brian had done in the first hours of January 1st on the devices found inside that house. Investigators recovered multiple electronic devices from the Walshe family home. A forensic examiner from the Massachusetts State Police analyzed the data extracted from those devices. The search history began at 4:52 a.m. on January 1st, 2023. 4:55 a.m. How long before a body starts to smell? 4:58 a.m. How to stop a body from decomposing? 5:28 a.m. How to embalm a body? 5:47 a.m. 10 ways to dispose of a dead body if you really need to. The searches did not stop there. 11 to 44 a.m. How to clean blood from a wooden floor. 12:01 p.m. Hacksaw, best tool to dismember? Later. How long does DNA last? Later still. Can you be charged with murder without a body? During police interviews in the days that followed, investigators played Brian Walshe the searches and asked him to explain them. His response, recorded on audio, "I have no idea." The forensic examiner testified at trial that the digital records show the user had visited related pages before, that the engagement patterns indicated prior familiarity with the material. Not a first search, a return. The defense argued that Brian had discovered Anna Walshe dead that morning, that she had died of natural causes, and that the searches were the panicked behavior of a man in shock. A search at 4:55 a.m. asking how long before decomposition begins is not the behavior of someone who has just found a body. A search at 5:47 a.m. listing 10 systematic disposal methods is not what shock produces. A search at noon asking for the optimal tool for dismemberment is not grief. These searches are a work plan, written in real time, beginning less than an hour after Anna Walshe was last seen alive. What investigators recovered from a trash collection facility in Peabody, Massachusetts, was the physical record of what had happened in the basement of the Walshe family home. A hacksaw, a hatchet, a Tyvek protective suit, the kind worn specifically to prevent biological material from reaching the wearer's own clothing, blood-stained slippers, a section of rug cut and discarded, a blood-stained towel, and a piece of human tissue recovered from a garbage bag, all of it connected by location data to the dumpster near Brian Walshe's mother's apartment complex in Swampscott, where his phone had placed him on the morning of January 5th, has never been found. But what the Massachusetts State Police Crime Laboratory found on those discarded items is the closest thing to her that investigators have ever recovered. Saman Salim, a unit supervisor at the State Police Crime Lab, testified about the forensic analysis. The DNA extracted from the hacksaw blade was, in her words, at least 39 million times more likely to have originated from Anna Walshe than from any unknown, unrelated individual. The hatchet showed biological material consistent with fatty tissue. The residue left when a blunt instrument is used against a human body. Blood found on the basement floor, the last confirmed location where Anna was alive, matched her DNA profile. Brian Walshe was excluded as a contributor. The defense challenged the forensic methodology. They raised contamination possibilities. They argued about interpretive limits. Their position remained. Brian found Anna dead, and the evidence was consistent with panic. What the defense could not explain was the Tyvek suit. A Tyvek suit is not what a person reaches for in panicked grief. It is what someone puts on when they have already thought about what biological contamination means for them specifically. When what comes next has been considered in advance. Brian Walshe's DNA and Anna Walshe's DNA were both found on the Tyvek suit. The prosecution presented 48 witnesses. The defense called none. Prosecutors presented two theories of motive at trial. The first, Brian Walshe had discovered his wife's affair and acted from jealousy. The second was more precise and more disturbing than that. Brian Walshe was awaiting sentencing in a federal fraud case. He owed $475,000 in restitution. He was facing prison time, but there was a specific condition attached to his home confinement arrangement in Cohasset, one that most coverage of this case has almost entirely overlooked. Brian's ability to remain at home, rather than in a federal facility, was structured in part around his role as the primary caretaker for his three young sons. The children were in Cohasset with him. That was the arrangement. Anna Walshe had set up rooms for those children in her Washington, D.C. townhouse. She was planning to take them with her if she left with the children. Brian's caretaker arrangement collapsed. The home confinement framework collapsed with it, and the federal prison sentence he had been deferring for years became, at that point, unavoidable. He owed $475,000. She held 2 properties in her name. She had a rising career, a committed relationship in Washington, a townhouse with rooms for his children, and a divorce search already in her future. Every variable in the equation was moving against him simultaneously. Prosecutors argued, and 12 jurors ultimately agreed, that Brian Walshe looked at Anna not as a person whose life had equal weight to his own. He looked at her as a problem that had become expensive to maintain and dangerous to let leave. By all accounts, he believed he had built a defensible position. No body, no established cause of death. A narrative that could not be fully disproven. He had made the FBI and the Department of Justice work for 3 years to get a guilty plea in the art fraud case. He had performed his way through the legal system before. He had searched whether you can be charged with murder without a body. He would find out. Before we talk about what happened in that courtroom, we need to stop. Because cases like this pull toward the forensic, toward the searches, the DNA ratios, the Tyvek suit, the timestamps. And when that pull is strong enough, the person at the center of it, the person whose life all of that evidence represents the destruction of, can disappear inside their own case. Anna Walshe deserves better than that here. Anna Ljubicic left Belgrade in 2005 with a French literature degree and a willingness to build something from nothing in a country that did not know her name. She built it. It took 20 years, and she built every part of it herself, the career, the professional reputation, the family, in a language that was not her first. Everyone who worked with her described her with the same words: genuine, present. The kind of person who made you feel that the conversation you were having with her was the only thing she was thinking about. When she did not appear for work on January 4th, 2023, it was her colleagues at Tishman Speyer who filed the welfare check. Not a neighbor, not a family member. The people she worked with, because Anna Walshe was so reliably and consistently present in her professional life that when she was suddenly not there. When she did not show up and did not call and did not respond, the people around her knew immediately that something was wrong. They did not wait. They called. That is who she was at work. Someone whose absence registered as an emergency. William Fastow, who had spent months in her company in Washington, testified at trial about something she had said to him about her sons. She was, he said, extremely disappointed that she was not in a position to be the mother she believed her children deserved. Not angry, not bitter, disappointed in herself, in the situation. She was measuring herself against the standard of who she wanted to be for her children, and finding the circumstances lacking and trying to fix it. The rooms in the Washington townhouse were not strategy. They were a mother trying to close the gap between the life she was living and the one she believed her sons were owed. After midnight on New Year's Eve, she made 3 phone calls. Her mother in Belgrade, her maid of honor, her older sister. She had called Belgrade regularly throughout the years. They'd connected to where she had come from, across everything she had built beyond it. That night, her mother missed the call. Her maid of honor missed it. Her sister missed it. She tried. That is not a small detail. It is a complete portrait of a person in 3 unanswered calls, reaching toward the people she loved on the last night of her life. Anna Walshe wrote a letter to a federal judge in 2021 asking for leniency for the man who would later kill her. She described him as the love of her life. She said he brought her family joy and comfort. She used her own credibility, the credibility she had built over 20 years of being exactly who she appeared to be, in service of someone who had never once extended her the same honesty. She was not foolish. She was not naive. She was a woman who believed that a person was capable of changing, that the effort she put into something was something the other person could meet halfway. She was wrong about one person, and that error cost her everything. She deserved to be in that Washington townhouse with her children. She deserved to have her 3 calls answered. She deserved to be alive for nearly 2 years. Brian Walshe maintained one consistent position. He had found Anna Walshe dead that morning, natural causes, and he had panicked. What followed was grief, not guilt. His lawyers constructed that case carefully. They challenged every forensic conclusion and cross-examined every expert witness. On November 18, 2025, just as jury selection began, Brian Walshe quietly changed part of his position, pleading guilty to misleading police and to the improper removal of Anna's body, 2 lesser charges on record. He still denied the murder. The defense called no witnesses. Brian Walshe did not take the stand. And then the jury deliberated. The prosecution had presented 48 witnesses across 2 weeks of trial. The defense had presented 0. On December 15, 2025, a jury of 6 women and 6 men deliberated for approximately 6 hours. Guilty. First-degree murder. Brian Walshe showed no visible reaction as the verdict was read. On December 18, 2025, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The detail the prosecution never needed to resolve was cause of death. Without Anna's body, they could not establish definitively how she died. What they established instead was everything surrounding it. The searches before 5:47 a.m., the Tyvek suit, the hacksaw, the DNA 39 million times more likely to be hers, the timeline of stores and dumpsters and cleanup. The jury did not require a cause of death. They had a pattern, and patterns, this verdict established, are sufficient. This conviction, no body, no established cause of death, no confession, is the answer Brian Walshe had searched for on the morning of January 1st, 2023. Can you be charged with murder without a body? The answer December 15th, 2025. Yes, there is something about this case that the forensic evidence establishes, and that the verdict confirms, but that almost no coverage of it has stated plainly. Brian Walshe did not begin with Anna. Think about the sequence. A South Korean classmate, a man who had known Brian for years, who handed him 2 authenticated Warhol paintings and trusted him to act as his agent, was deceived, robbed, and then avoided for months while Brian refused to return calls or money. That man eventually got the FBI involved. Brian performed remorse. The process took years. Then Ron Rivlin, a Warhol specialist, a professional, a man who by his own account had never once been deceived in over 1,000 acquisitions, found him charismatic, articulate, transparent, and professional, and paid $80,000 for paintings that were fake. Brian became unreachable. Rivlin said later, he lacks basic empathy. He knows how to play everyone and everything. Then Anna. 3 people, 3 separate engagements, each one beginning with the same thing. A performance of trustworthiness sustained over sufficient time to extract something of value, each one ending the same way. The performance stops the moment maintaining it, costs more than abandoning it. The Korean friend provided art world access and a transaction. Ron Rivlin provided $80,000. Anna provided the financial stability, the domestic, and the legal framework that stood between Brian and a Federated sentence. When each of them stopped being useful or became dangerous to his continued operation, the performance ended. What makes Anna's case different from the 2 that preceded it is not the calculation, was the same. What makes it different is only the method. 3 boys were in that house on New Year's Day, 2023. They are growing up now. The oldest, who was 6 years old when his mother did not come back, is approaching 9. The youngest is approaching 5. At some point, not far away, they will be old enough to ask questions about where their mother is, about what happened in the basement of their house, about the searches their father made on a laptop before 6 a.m. on the morning they rang in the new year, about the letter their mother wrote to a judge calling him the love of her life. When those questions come, and they will, nobody will be able to give them a complete answer. Because Anna Walshe's body has never been found, and the most honest thing that the evidence in this case establishes, the thing that runs from Carnegie Mellon to a West Hollywood gallery, basement in Cohasset, is that the people Brian Walshe destroyed were not accidents. They were selections. And the most dangerous thing about a person who selects this way is that they are very, very difficult to see coming. Until after. Brian Walshe had a federal conviction on record from 2018. For 4 years, while Atza was raising 3 sons and writing letters to judges on his behalf, the system that already had his name in its files could not get him behind bars. The jury convicted him on December 15th, 2025. But I want to know what you think. Does that verdict close the accounting on this case? Or does justice here require something longer and harder than one man's sentence? Leave your answer below. The next case we are covering involves a man who was trusted with a family that was not his, and what that trust eventually cost the people who gave it to him.